Start recording. Okay, awesome. So, good morning. I will try to monitor the chat, but most likely it will be easier if you just unmute when you have to speak. Okay, it will be easier for me. So, this morning we will just want to cover a few data visualization tips with Excel. Okay, data visualization is just as the name implies, right? How do you make data? How do you transform data from being maybe numbers or words or images? How do you make them visual, right? How do you make them visual? So especially for we that are studying economics, the concept of data visualization is not all that new, right? It's not all that new. We are used to it. We are used to creating visuals, even if it's just our usual demand and supply, downward sloping, upward sloping, right? That is still a form of visualization of data, right? So when we say data visualization, it's just simply a visual representation of data or data with the aim of the aim of sending a message across or presenting a certain information or insight to an audience. So that's just basically what data visualization is. So this morning we are going to cover some of the features in Excel that we can use to visualize data. What are the kind of charts that we can create in Excel? What are the kind of charts you're supposed to use depending on the kind of data that you have? How do you make the charts that you create in Excel less boring, right? So that people don't just say, this chart doesn't make sense, or I don't understand what you're trying to show. Okay, so that's what we're going to try and cover probably in the next 2 hours. So what are the options that you have to create charts in Excel? Now, for almost everything that we have in Excel, you would access it through the ribbon. So if you go over to the Insert tab, okay, you will see this charts section here. In this chart section here, you have a range of charts that you can create with Excel, starting from basic things like a bar chart to a pie chart to a line chart to a scatter diagram. Almost all the basic kind of charts that you can think of, you can create in Excel. Okay, so briefly, let's just look at a chart guide. Right, so this chart guide is one that was created by the Financial Times. So the Financial Times is like a media outlet, right? Basically like a media outlet. So they created this visual vocabulary, and it basically shows the different kind of visualizations or different kind of charts that you can create depending on the kind of data or depending on the kind of message that you are trying to pass across. Okay, so let me just zoom in a bit so we can just briefly look at this. Okay, so they broke it down into about 9 different categories. So if you want to show deviation, what do you mean by deviation? Is just basically how something differs from a particular value, a particular target. So maybe you want to show deviation, you want to show correlation, ranking, distribution, changes over time, magnitude, and part to whole. That is, you have a group, and then you want to show how each individual part contributes to that whole. And then you have also spatial data. Spatial data is geographical data, right? So you are visualizing countries, you are visualizing locations, you are visualizing what else? Maybe streets, anything that has to do with space. right? Geographical space, that's spatial data. And then you have flows. So flows are like you want to show how this impacts this, and then with the impact of it on that variable, you want to show how it impacts another variable and all of those things. So let's look at the kind of charts that we have. So for deviations, right, it says emphasis on variations from a fixed reference point, and then you have a couple of charts. Okay, so we have diverging bar, diverging stack bar, a spine chart, a surplus deficit line. Then for the correlation, see that we have scatter plots, a column and line chart, a connected scatter plot, heat map, bubble chart. So these are all different types of charts. Okay, so if you are trying to visualize ranking, you have an ordered bar, ordered column, dot plot, slope. So these are just different types of charts depending on the kind of data that you have or what you're trying to show. Okay, but we would not be covering all of these charts because they are, number one, they are a lot. Two, you can't create all of it in Excel at a basic level, right? So what we just want to cover this morning is to look at common chart types that you have in Excel, common chart types, and how to create them in Excel. So I included two chart guides. It's basically the same set of categories but created by two different people. So the first one was created by Financial Times, and this one was created by a data visualization specialist by name Andy Kribel. So it basically just shows you the same thing but in a different way, right? So you can have a look at this and look at the different chart types that you can create for different kinds of data. So let's now start proper creating charts with Excel. Well, now before we begin, I want to I want to ask a question, and I'll love you guys to respond. When we talk about data, like you guys are doing, you've done statistics in your year 1, year 2, okay? What are the types of data that we have when you're looking at it from the measurement scale? Like, what kind of data do we have? Just in the next 2 minutes, I say 2 minutes, the next 10 seconds, right? Just give a response. What kind of data do we have? What are the types of data do we have? What are the types of data we have based on the measurement scale, based on how they are measured? So let me see if I have any message in the chat. None. Okay. So I'm waiting if you have a response. Okay, so we have two types of data. All right, could you give us what those two examples are? Quantitative and qualitative. That is very correct. Very correct. So broadly, we have two types of data: quantitative data and qualitative data. So when we talk about quantitative data, these are data that are measured in numerical terms. So let me just put it up here. So we have let's see, let me create something. So we have types of data. So we have quantitative and we have qualitative. Now the quantitative data are basically just data that are in form of numbers. Okay, so you can see they're just basically numerical kind of data. And then the qualitative data are what we can refer to as maybe categorical. That is data that just basically are categories, or their buckets, or their groups. right? They are not necessarily numbers, they are texts. Those are what we can refer to as qualitative data. So depending on the kind of data that you have, right, there are different visualization options that you can explore. That is, there are different kind of charts that you can use to show that data. So now the first chart type that we're going to consider is a bar chart, right? And when do we use a bar chart? We use a bar chart when we are trying to show categories. Okay, so you have a set of categorical data, and then you want to visualize that and show, okay, which one is the maximum, which one is the minimum, or stuff like that. So I have a brief example here. This is gotten from some of the data sets that we have used in our past classes. So this is just basically showing the departments in an organization, fictitious organization, and the total salary that is being paid to the staff in each of those departments, right? So let's assume that our goal here is to see, okay, which department is contributing, or which department are we paying the most salary in our organization. Okay, so how do we create a bar chart? You basically start by first selecting the chart. Okay, so you select the chart, and then you can you can select it from these options, but I prefer to use the icon at the bottom here that says see all charts, so that you can see all of the different options that you have, as well as a preview of what you're about to create. So if I click on this little drop, this arrow here at the edge of this chart under the insert tab, it brings up a dialog box now. While it's loading, okay, so it brings up this dialog box that shows all the different chart types that I can create. So first, I have a set of recommended charts. That is, Excel is trying to be smart and say, okay, given the data that you have highlighted, these are some options, right? But we will just go to all charts and say we want to create a bar chart. So within the bar chart option, I have different types of bar charts according to Excel. So the first one here is called a clustered bar. As you can see the name here, a clustered bar. I have another chart type that is referred to as a stacked bar. Okay, and then I also have 100% stacked bar, and then I have the 3D versions of these three chart types. But for this example, a clustered bar chart is okay. So I select the clustered bar chart and click OK, and then a chart gets inserted into the worksheet. So with the chart inserted, let's look at the different chart elements that we have. Okay, so once your chart gets created, you would see is like an image that is linked to this chart. See, now once I click on the chart, I have this range highlighted that telling me that, okay, this chart is being created from this data here. Now within the chart, we have different elements. So if I go to the top here and I hover on it, you see it calls what? That's the screen tip here. If you can read it, says chart title. So this is the chart title. At the left here, we have what we call categories or axes, right? So what we refer to as axes is still called axis in Excel, but when you have text like this, Excel will call it category. So this now is called what? Vertical axis for the category that I've used in my data. And then if I go down here to where we have the x-axis, Excel calls it the horizontal axis, which makes sense. So we have the vertical axis, we have the horizontal axis. Now if I click somewhere in this chart, I see that I have just inside the chart here highlighted, that is known as the plot area. So it is the area within the chart that you have created where the data actually gets plotted. So this is known as the plot area. And then you see I have these lines that basically match up to the x-axis that I have here. So those lines are referred to as grid lines. Okay, they are referred to as grid lines. And then I have my series. Okay, so my departments here in this case are referred to as categories, and then the values here are referred to as series. So that is how Excel refers to when you put in a numerical variable into a chart. Excel will call it series. Okay, so if I had, let's say, total salary and I had maybe number of employees, that means I'll have two series. The first series will be my salary, the second series will be total employees. So as anyone who has ever tried to use Excel before, if it's that you wanted to create a bar chart, you would just plot your bar chart, select your data, plot your bar chart, and you have the chart already. But it's not enough. Okay, it's not enough to just create your chart and leave it like this. So while your chart is still selected, okay, you can move it to any part you want. Just make sure that once you click on it, you're not clicked in the plot area, you're not clicked on the series or on the grid lines, you're just clicked outside of the chart or on the edge of the chart till you see where your cursor becomes like this cross with 4 arrows. So when you have that cursor activated, you can move the chart to wherever you want. Okay, so while the chart is selected, we can edit different elements of the chart. The shortest way to do that is to select your chart, and then by the side here you will see this little plus icon. I think from Excel 2013 or 2010 onwards, this icon is there, just a little plus icon. So if you click on this plus icon, it brings up a couple of elements, alright, a couple of parts of your chart known as the chart element that you can edit. So I have my axis titles, chart title, can add data labels, grid lines, all of that, right? So let's just say, okay, as an example, I want to know the actual number for each of these categories. Like, rather than having an axis that shows it, I want to have the actual number on it. So that's what is referred to as data labels. So I can select data labels and then it gets added. That's nice. So once I have my data labels there, I can say, okay, since I have my data labels, I don't need to have my axis there again, because my data labels and my axis will be showing the same information, right? So I can select my axis here and delete by pressing the delete key, and that goes away. Or I can undo and say, okay, let me go to axis. While this plus selected here, I can go to axis, and you see that when I unchecked it, it removed both the horizontal and vertical, that is both the x-axis and the y-axis. So I can say, no, I want it back, but I only want to remove, in this case it's going to be the horizontal. So I can come here and say uncheck horizontal but leave vertical, and then I'll have this. I can expand the chart, right, just by dragging as you would any image. Then I can look at the grid lines as well. So since I don't have the x-axis, right, I can take away the grid lines, because now the grid lines are not really showing anything. So I can take away the grid lines, and I can still also decide that, okay, these bars are not wide enough, I want to make them larger. I can select the bar, right click on it and open and select format data series. So when you select format data series, you have this little panel that opens up by the right. In this panel, you can edit any part of the chart. So while you could quickly edit some parts by just toggling this, selecting this plus icon and checking and unchecking certain aspects, if you want to customize a lot of things in the chart, what I like to do is just select my chart, right click and say maybe format data series, and then it brings up this panel. And then when I select any element in my chart, you see that I get a new set of options in my in the panel here, the format axis here, and so that shows me all of the options that I have to format that chart. Okay, so I can select this, you see I have a new option. I can select data labels, you see I have a new option. So let's say okay, we wanted to just format these bars, we wanted to make them bigger. So I'll select on the bars. So you see that once I select on the bars, I have a set of options here. Here is like to change the fill color and to add maybe borders. Here I can add effects like shadow, a glow, soft edges, 3D formats, just basically change the look and feel. And here I can edit the series and change maybe the series overlap and the gap width. So let's look at it now. When we say series overlap majorly applies when you have more than one series, but in this case we just have one series, but we want to change the size. So I will just go over to the gap width here and increase it slightly. If I increase it, see what happens. The width of the bars are reducing, so I can reduce, draw it back, and then it increases. So I can just say okay, let me just leave it at, let's say 40, and then I have the bar here. So now we see that some bars are conflicting with these data labels that we have added here. Like we can see some are exactly outside, some are inside. So to adjust that, I can either expand my chart, okay, I won't do that, or I select in the plot area. So this is the chart area, this is the plot area. So I can select in the plot area and then reduce the size of the plot without affecting the entire chart. So only this data that has been plotted gets affected. Okay, so I can increase it or I can reduce it. So I'll reduce it such that all of the data labels that I've added would show very well. Now, even with what we have now, we can still edit the data labels. So I can select the data labels, go over to, while now because I have opened this format panel, anytime I select any element, I get a new set of options. So as I selected the data labels, I can now say okay, go down to edit. I want to come to this third menu under for the label options and edit the size and properties and say okay, do I want to make them bigger or smaller? Do I want to change the alignment? Maybe not. I can come to this fourth option here, go to label options, and then I can say maybe I want to put the labels inside. Okay, so I can change it to from inside to center to outside end, inside base, outside end. So I can change the position of my data labels. Okay, so let's say I wanted it inside end. Now because it is inside end, now you see that because of the color of the text is not readable, right? So I can select data labels, come over to my home tab and change maybe the color to white so that it shows distinctively on the chart. Okay, so you could have had the data labels outside the chart, or you can have them inside the chart. Now while we are still here, a very good what's it called now, a very good practice when you are showing data on a bar chart is Once you have plotted the data like this on a chart, you've created a bar chart with the data. Always try to sort the values either in ascending or descending order. Okay, so don't just say, okay, you were given the data like this, it was plotted by, in this case now it was plotted alphabetically by department, but when we created the chart looks too busy. Because if I say, okay, we want to identify which one is the largest, which one is the department with the most salary, now you already know is this, but you notice this, you now try to start searching through. But you can make that easier if you already had it sorted. And the easiest way to do that is to click outside your chart and then select data that you have. Okay, so when you select data you have, you can go over to, let me see if I can get this out of the way first. Okay, so you can go over to the data tab and then select sort, right? Or if you just only the salary you want to sort, you can select only salary and sort. But since I'm going to be sorting the salary, the department by the salary, I select all of this, go over to data, and maybe I want to sort whether ascending or descending, or I can click on sort. So that one brings up the sorting menu where I can decide, okay, how do I want to sort the data. So in this case, I'll say, okay, column sort by total salary based on the cell values from largest to smallest, and I click on OK. Now what has happened? I sorted largest to smallest, but Excel has reversed it from smallest to largest. That happens a lot, but you can fix that by just formatting your chart. So in this case now I can select my category, okay, and then I'll just cycle through these options till I see what I'm looking for. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. I think axis options. Now under the axis options here, I can just come down here and say, okay, categories in reverse order. So the departments have been sorted in descending order from largest to smallest. But when I created the chart, Excel sorted it from smallest to largest. Now if I sort the data from smallest to largest, this would reverse. But if I select the category, that is the axis, and come over to this option here and say, okay, categories in reverse order, Excel now correctly sorts it in the way that I want. So this now is more useful because at a glance I already know that sales is the highest, security is the lowest, and these are the top 4, compared to when we had that, compared to when it was not sorted correctly. So this is the first chart that we've created, just a basic bar chart showing the total salaries that are paid to different departments. Now once you've done the visual aspect of the chart, okay, so I will now show you some of the things that I like to do when I create the chart. So I've created my chart. I also like to change the colors. Okay, instead of using the default colors that Excel uses, I like to change my color. So I'll right click on this and say format data series, and then I'll go to this first option here and I can change the fill to, let's say, a solid fill, and then I'll come and select the color I want. So let's say I just want to use a darker blue, and then I have a darker blue. If I don't want that, I can change it to maybe gray, something dark like this, and that works as well. So if you can change the colors, you can change the font, you can do quite a lot of things with it. So as we are progressing through different examples, I will show you different things. The last thing we are just going to do to this chart is to give it a title. So I'll come here, select the chart title, double click or triple click, and then let's just call this salary or let's say total salary by department. Okay, so total salary by department, and then I can drag this to the extreme left here. So when you want to drag an image, or when you have like a text object or let's say an image, a chart, and then you want to shift the chart, or you want to shift that object in Excel, keeping it on the same line, just select it. And when you have that, you move cursor. When you have a cursor changes to this cross with arrows, hold down the shift key and drag, and that way you can drag an element while it still remains on the same line. So we've looked at the first categorical data, right? We had departments and salaries, and then we created a bar chart. The next example I want to show is creating a pie chart. Now all of us have probably seen a pie chart before, right? It's just a circle with slices and all of that. So for this example, we are going to create a pie chart just using this dummy data here. So let's assume that this is the summary of a survey, right, that had a certain number of respondents, whether male or female. So in this case, we had male 73, female 57, and then we want to visualize how this differs, how this is distributed between the two genders. So I can select data, go over to the insert tab, and then either come into this drop down here, or from the options here I can just select pie chart. Now you see when I selected this, I had 2D pie, I have 3D pie, I have a donut chart, but I think I'm fine with a 2D pie, and I select a 2D pie chart and I get this. So is this useful enough? Probably not, right? And it's very common for most of us when we are trying to create charts in Excel. When we first start out, we just go into Excel, select the data, choose a particular chart type, and then we just copy it and put it inside our report or document or whatever it is that we're writing. But like we're trying to learn here is, even while you're creating different chart types in Excel, you always want to format it away from the default, right? But while you're formatting it away from the default, you don't do what is wrong. So in this case now, we have a simple pie chart, and the first thing is, what am I looking at? I have a pie chart showing male, female. So we have introduced a new chart element that we didn't see while we were creating the bar chart. And when you have a chart that has like two different data series, in this case we had respondents for both male and female, this indicator that has been added here is what is known as a legend in Excel. So it says I'm moving over, it's called legend. So the legend is what tells you, basically color codes the different series that you have in your chart. So for this particular chart, let's say I've created the chart, but I don't like how it is. I know that male is blue and female is orange, but I want to know what is the value, what value am I looking at here for male, what value am I looking at here for female. I can select the chart, click on my chart element here and say let me add data labels, and then I get data labels here that says 57, 73. Fine, we are getting somewhere, but it doesn't still look nice enough, right? It doesn't still look nice enough. So I can click on the chart labels, right click and say format data labels, and then I get this panel that comes up here. This is our format pane, right? Anytime you are editing anything in Excel, I think from when you start from 2013 or so, you always get this format pane there. Okay, so once you have selected the data labels, I can say, okay, what do I want to change in this case? Do I want to change the color? Maybe yes. Let's say from fill. Am I changing the fill? No, I'm not changing the fill, so I close that. In this case, maybe I want to change the text. So while I have it selected, I can just come over to my home tab and change the text to white, and maybe increase the font a little bit. Okay, but let's say I want this, instead of showing in values, I want this to show as percentages. So while it's selected, I go over to my format data labels and see if I have any option to show as percentage. Now, because I'm working with a pie chart, I have an option here to add percentage, so I can click on it and it shows both the value and the percentage. But I think I'm fine with just the percentage rather than the value, so I'll uncheck the value and then I have only the percentage. And then I can also change the position of my data labels. So here we look at label options, where we can add different elements to just data labels now. So I can add the series name, can add the category name, can add value, and so you add different options. Then I can also change the position of the data labels, whether I want it inside end, outside end, or at the center, right? Or just ask Excel to find a best fit. So I think let's look at inside end, outside end. Let's go with inside end. I think inside end looks nice, and it would also be nice if you could just read the chart once without having to look at the legend to figure out which one is male and which one is female. So we can add the category name, and then we have, okay, this is male 40, female 40%, 44%, male 55%. That's fine. So next thing is color. Always try not to go with a default Excel color. So I would select the chart, select again to choose only the male series. Then here I'll change the field to maybe, yes, I think black is fine, or maybe something a little bit lighter than that. Then I can select the female series and change it to a contrasting color that is not too far apart, right? Maybe something like this, or a little bit lighter. Let's see. Okay, I think the blue is fine. So we have that. Male is 56%, female 44%. Now, since I already have an indication of which one is male and which one is female, I can take this legend out because it's not going to be adding any more useful information. So if I select the legend, I can press delete and that goes out immediately. So I can attempt to reduce my chart size. Maybe it's too wide. Okay, and then I'm almost done with my chart, except for the fact that now the name is crunched. So maybe we can expand it a bit so that it's fine. Okay, so we've added chart data labels, we've changed the color. Next thing is to now add a good title that shows what we are looking at. In this case, we assume that maybe these are responses from a survey. We can say, okay, respondents by gender, right? Respondents by gender. Then we can drag that and put it at the right here. So we have, a nice pie chart that shows us the distribution by gender. You can change the individual position of these chart labels. Maybe you want them to be aligned on the same line. So select the data labels, this selects all of the data labels. Then if you click again, you're only editing one now. So I can just come to the edge here, see where the cursor changes from either this to that move on, and I can drag it up till I'm fine with it. Okay, and I can leave it this way. Maybe you want to make it bold, select it, Ctrl B. You can uncheck different elements. Okay, maybe I don't want it to wrap. I select this, I go to size and properties here, I uncheck wrap, and even if I increase the size, it doesn't try and fit in that space. So this is just a basic bar chart and a basic pie chart. Now it's very common, like when you are trying to visualize categorical data like this, there are certain cases where it is good to use a bar chart and there are certain cases where it is good to use a pie chart. Now imagine that we tried to take this information and create a pie chart out of it. Let's try it and see. So I'll copy this now. Let's just add it here at the end here, and let's see if we create a pie chart out of this, how it's going to look. So I select all of this, go over to insert, select 2D pie, and look at what I have here. This is looking like pizza or something, right? So is this a good visualization? I don't think so. And why is that? Because if you look at the first bar chart we created, in 5 seconds or less, if I ask you that what is the department with the highest salary, you know immediately, like sales, you know immediately that maintenance follows, you know that the least is security. But if you look at the pie chart, you can't tell which one is the largest one without having to maybe add data labels, add and say, okay, this one is 25%, this one is 36%, and all of that, right? So the point here is that when you are trying to visualize categorical data, the first option you have that mostly comes to mind is, okay, let's use a bar chart, right? The second option is maybe you want to use a pie chart. But when you want to use a pie chart, always first ask yourself or look at data and see, do you have a lot of categories? Okay, so once you're having more than 2, 3, maybe 4 categories, right, that should be the max for using a pie chart. Once you're having more than 3, 4 categories, you need to look for a different chart to visualize that data, because the moment the categories increase in a pie chart, the more useless, right, that chart you have created is. Because here I can't tell you anything about this chart. Even if I say, okay, I want to add data labels, just look at this, like, what is this? How do you read this? And then you have to start checking, okay, this blue is which one? For okay, I think this blue is sales. Do you get? So always, when you're using a pie chart, always make sure you have very, very few categories, 2, 3, maybe max 4, so that the distinction between each of the categories will be more visible. So I'll just delete this because that's a very, very bad chart type. So we've looked at just visualizing one single category, okay, and let me also show you some other options that we have. Let me use, okay, so we've created a bar chart. We could also create a column chart. So I'll select the data and go to insert, and then let me just use this one. And then under all charts, we also have a column chart. Now I can insert a column chart, select it and say okay. Now the column chart is just exactly like the bar chart. So bar is when you have it horizontal like this, column is when you have it vertical. So the column chart and the bar chart are exactly the same thing. The only difference there is that what this one is flipped. Okay, so when you're visualizing categorical data, you can use a bar chart, you can use a column chart, you can use a pie chart. But when you use either of those ones, depends on the kind of data you have. In this case now, look at the way my categories are, right? They are tilted, like slanted diagonally. This is not easily readable as this. Okay, so you have this is just straight, you can read it easily compared to this one. So the choice between a column chart and a bar chart when you have categorical data is to say, okay, are the categories that I want to visualize, do they have long text? When the categories have long text, right, it's best to use the bar, right, the horizontal one, rather than the column, because then you have the length, the text are easily readable compared to this one. So this is still a good option for visualizing, categorical data, right? You want to show the ranking, but only use it when you have what's it called now, when you have text that are short and they are not too many, so that when all of them sits down here, they are visible when you read them, when you try to read them. Okay, so that's the first example of visualizing categorical data when you have just one category. Second one I want to show, okay, also want to show another example of visualizing single category. So we have used this data set in some of the exercises, and we just want to create, a quick visual, right? Let's say our goal is to look at the number of persons. Let's say number of persons by department. Now we can quickly create a summary of this. So I can select all of the departments I have, Ctrl C, and then come here and paste it, and then I can go over to the data tab and then select remove duplicates. So when I select remove duplicates, I only have a unique list of all of the departments that I have here, right? So let's just remind ourselves quickly of some of the things that we did in previous classes. So I can say, okay, let me just quickly write a simple formula to show me the number of individuals in each department. So I say, okay, sum ifs, right? Say count this. That's my criteria. So that's my sum range. My criteria range is a department, and my criteria is this. So if you are part of our classes, this should not be, this should not be new. But that's strange.
I think it should be counted.
Oh, did I use sum ifs? Okay, yes, that should be count ifs. Thank you for that. Yes, that should be count ifs. See, we make mistakes sometimes. Okay. Okay, so count if just needs a criteria range and a criteria. So I can remove this. Yeah. So copy that down. And so I have the departments and the number of persons in each department. So let me insert a new row above here so I can add a title. So right click, insert, shift cells down, and I say this is department and this is number of persons. Let's make this bold and add a border. Okay, so we have this. Let's create our bar chart. So how do we create a bar chart? Select data, go over to insert, can just click here and say give me a 2D bar chart. Then we can now format the chart to make it more visually appealing and more presentable. Okay, just basically replicating all of the things that we did here. But the point I wanted to drive us here is that even after so far most of the classes, most of the tasks that we've had, we just created summary tables to try to see how many do we have in this category, do a summaries, do a countives. You can take that calculation one step further by doing what? Showing it visually, right? Maybe I just want to sort this over to data and maybe sort by number of persons, smallest to largest. Okay, so then you can now format this to make this much more presentable. Okay, but the point here is that you can take data, right, create a summary report or create a little summarization, and then from the summarization you can create a chart out of it. So you can take this out and try it out and say, okay, maybe we did by department. You can take this chart and format it to make it more visually appealing, and then you can also look at it by status. Now in this case we only have two different statuses, either it is hourly or half time. So you can create your little summarization. Okay, hourly, half time, find the number of persons that we have in those different status, and maybe create a pie chart or even a bar chart out of it to see, okay, do we have more hourly staff compared to staffs that work half time. Okay, so that's just that. Maybe take that as a take-home assignment. So that is categorical visualization using bar chart, pie chart, column chart. Let's look at a second one, and this is when you have categorical data but you have more than one category. So previously we've had just one department, maybe one department, one status, just gender. Okay, but sometimes you may have more than one department. Okay, you may have more than one department. Now how do you visualize that? We still also have a set of options. So I've just provided a summary of, again, some of the data set that we have used. This is just basically showing the number of employees, okay, in that are a particular gender and have worked for a particular period of time. So for female that have worked 5 to 15 years, we have 1,189. Those that have worked less than 15, we have this. Those that have worked more than 15, we have this. And then we also have the same for males. So the first option is to use the bar chart. Sorry, we can try to use the bar chart. So let's select this, go to insert, and I'll just, in this case, I will select the same clustered bar that we have been using. Now look at this. So look at what Excel did. It basically just broke it into two. So we have male, more than 15, we have their values. Less than 5, we have their values. 5 to 15, we have their values. So it has taken, it has taken my categories and done what? Reverse it. So here I had female first, here I have male first. I had 5 to 15 first, I have 5 to 15 last. So I can select this and do what? Right click and go to format data labels, or I can just press Ctrl 1, and that also opens this format pane, right? Okay, so that opens the format pane as well. So I can select the format pane, and then in this last category here, I can change it to categories in reverse order, right? So now I have it. Okay, for female 5 to 15 years, this is it, this is it, this is it, and then I can format it as well. So this chart is still, this chart type is still a bar chart, and it's called a clustered column chart. So what I want to show you here is that even when you have hierarchies of categories, right? When you have hierarchies of categories, you can still visualize it probably using a bar chart. So let's look at some formatting options that we can do here. We can again add data labels. So when we have data labels, we can take out the axes because they are basically showing the same thing. So I take out the axis by pressing delete. I can come to the grid lines, take it out. I can select the bars and go to the last option here and reduce the gap width so that the bars are a little thicker. So I have this. I can maybe make the data labels a little bit bigger so they are more visible. Go to my home tab, maybe make it 11 points. I can also make my categories, the text, bigger. So I just select on the different chart elements and do anything you like with it. Okay, so I have this, and then I can add a descriptive title. Let's say I want to show number of employees by gender and years of service. Then I can align it to the left by holding it, clicking on it, holding shift and dragging. Then I can make it bold so that it stands out as a title and maybe increase the font to 16. I can maybe reduce the chart area. Everything, all this are just to make it, presentable. And I have my chart that shows number of employees by gender and years of service. Okay, for female I have 5 to 15 being the most, and I can see that for male it is also the same thing. Then I can change the color as well. I really like changing the color. I mostly don't like to use Excel default, so I can select the color, go to solid fill, and maybe this time around I can use with dark yellow. Or again, you never go wrong with black or gray. Gray always works most times. But you can play around with colors, but don't choose something that is too colorful. Okay, so this is when you have different categories, right? You have different categories. Another option is maybe you have a cross tab report like this, where you have something on the rows, something on the columns, and a value that shows you the sum or the total where both of these intersect. So this information now is basically the same thing that we have here, right, but has been visualized differently. Now before I go there, I just remember something. Let's see a different option to visualize this. Let's say that, okay, what if rather than showing for each female the category is splitted like this, what if we can have them on a single bar, right, and then they are splitted in that bar? So I can select this, go to insert, and I'll go to the drop down here to bring out all the chart options, and then Excel already give me a number of recommended charts. They will not always be the best one. Like, look at this one now. Without even looking at the values, can you tell out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slices, can you tell which one is the largest? You can't, right? You can't. So even if Excel shows you recommended charts, does not mean that they are the best charts. So I can go to all charts, and then looking at, let's say, our bar chart, I have two options. I have a clustered bar, which we've created now, and I also have a stacked bar. Now in this case, because of the nature of my data, a stacked bar would not show as a stacked bar, and that means that sometimes the way the data is presented in Excel determines the kind of chart that you can create. So certain chart types require your data to be in certain ways before they work. So I want to show you a stacked bar chart. And what's a stacked bar chart? It's just like you have this bar, and then you have each category stacked on each other, such that you can now say, okay, this portion shows, this category takes up a certain portion of the chart. So let's look at this now. In this case, we represented the same data but in a cross tabulated manner. So I can select the chart now and go to the same 2D bar. Let's start with the clustered one and look at what we have here now. It's different, right? Just because we did what? We changed the way the chart looks. So in this case now, we still have a variation of the bar chart, but now we have the different year of services on the vertical axis, and then we have a bar representing what? Male and female for each year of service. But that may not be what we want. Okay, maybe we want the male and female to be here, and then we want the different years of service to be in the colors. We can do that very easily. Select the chart. When you select the chart, you have a new tab called chart design. If I select on go to chart design, I can then switch row and column, and it just what? Inverts. Okay, so I have the same thing now, but instead the gender has been switched for the years of service. So I have the gender now on the axis, and then I have the years of service as the legend. Okay, the way you can create this for a bar chart that we have done now, this is a clustered bar chart. We can also make it a stacked bar chart. So let me just duplicate this, select the chart and press Ctrl D, and that duplicates the chart. Or you can select the chart, right click, and you should see duplicates, right? Okay, you can't, but that's a shortcut to duplicate. Select the chart and press Ctrl D, and it duplicates the chart. So I'm going to change this one to a different chart type. So here, what we have created here is a clustered bar, right? If you remember, we went to what? Insert to select the clustered bar, but we switched the row and column. But now we want to change the chart type from a clustered bar to a stacked bar. So if I select the chart, I go to change chart type. Under the chart design tab, you see change chart type. So I can change the chart type from clustered bar to 100% to a stacked bar, and then from a stacked bar I can change it to 100% stacked bar. But let's just look at the stacked bar. Now look at the stacked bar. In the preview here, we see we have two options. The first option, I don't know if it's visible. Okay, it is. So the first option here, we have the gender on the axis. Well, in this other one we have the years of service. But based on what we've been doing, I think this one is what we need. That's closer to what we're trying to show. So I will select that and click OK. I see that we have the same data but visualized in different ways. And what's the difference between these two? Here we are seeing how each year of service makes a part of the gender. Okay, we are seeing basically the same thing here, but in this case those categories in the years of service are stacked on each other. In this case they are clustered, that is, they are just side by side. Now maybe certain information, right, might be more visible when you do a certain chart type in one way compared to when you do it in a certain way. Because now if you look at this chart here now, immediately if you just glance through at it, you can say that okay, whether for male or for female, this blue bar is the largest. So which means that whether you're male, whether for the male employees or the female employees, we'll mostly have employees that have spent 5 to 15 years in service. But if you try to look for that information here, it's not that visible, right? It's not that visible. Let's change the question. So here we are looking at, okay, for each gender, what is the most years of service that we have? Obviously we saw that whether for the male or the female, is mostly 5 to 15. So let's now change and say, okay, within each category of the years of service, do we have more males and more females? So I'm going to use this one now, and I will say switch row and column. So now I have that, okay, across all the different years of service, do we have more male than female? Looking at it again, you might be tempted to say, okay, I think for 5 to 15, do we have more males than female? It's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell. But the only thing we can tell from here is that because of the length of these bars, you know that 5 to 15 is much. So maybe the stack bar chart is not going to work. We can change the chart type to another variation of the bar chart. If I go to change chart type, I can change it from a stack bar to a 100% stack bar. So what the 100% stack bar shows is like, instead of looking at the individual values in the bars, it looks at them as a percentage of the total. If I click OK, see what I now have here. I now have everything compared to, now I have everything on what, on a percentage scale. So looking at this now, I can see that, okay, in each of the different categories for our years of service, it seems like they are almost evenly distributed, because 50% will be somewhere around here, right? And then these bars seem to just change at around the middle, so they are almost the same thing. Yeah, okay, so they are almost the same thing. What I've just tried to show is that depending on what you want to show, you have different chart options, okay? And for the different chart options, they show different things more vividly than the other ones. You just basically have to say, okay, I have this kind of chart type, I'll try maybe creating a bar. Does it work? It shows some things, but that's not what I want. I'll try creating a stack bar. Does it work? I'll try creating a clustered bar. Does it work? Okay, no, let me switch the rows and columns. Is this what I want? You just play around so you find the one that shows you what you want. But just know that you have multiple ways of visualizing the data. So let's just do little formatting. Okay, little formatting. So for this one now, let's see if we can make it better. Maybe I can make it bigger. Okay, let me shift this. I can make it bigger. Do I want to add data labels? Like, let's say this time around I don't want to add data labels. Okay, I want to leave this axis here. I can format that axis, right? So if I select the axis, I press Ctrl+1 to bring out this pane here, and then I can now change the minimum, the maximum values, and then what interval this thing shows at. So we have bounds 0 to 1004. Maybe I want it to just stop at 1002 because my values are not that much. I can just come here and change it to 12. Am I okay with the scale? Maybe I'm okay with it increasing at to 200. That's fine. I can say, okay, the grid lines that I have, is it fine? Okay, yes. Maybe I want it to look more like a graph and make it dotted. I can select the grid lines, come over to the paint here, and then I can change the line type. See, I have a lot of options to change the color, the transparency, the width. I can say, okay, I want to change the dash type to dotted. And then I have something like this, right? That's still fine. I can come to the bars, right, and change the fill. Maybe for more than 15, I can change the color to, let's say that is like light gray. I can change it to light gray. For less than 5, let's say I want to change that one to a light dark blue. Okay, there's not enough contrast there. Let's try something like this. Okay, then for this last one, maybe I can now change that to something like this. Okay, these are not very good color choices, okay, but I'm just showing you that you have, the options to do that. And then you can still also change the gap width. Maybe you don't want them to be this close together. If you select any of them, you can come here, put the last point here and say, okay, change the gap width or change the series overlap. Okay, so you just play around with the options and see. If I change it fully, see what happens. I reduce it, see what happens. Okay, so I just find a nice sweet spot there. I think this is fine for me, and I can reduce the gap width or increase the gap width. Maybe I want to put the gap width at somewhere like here. So I have the different categories. Now I may want to take my legend and put it up so that it is easily accessible when someone is trying to read the chart. I can select the legend, and then just in my panel here, I can move it to the top, I can move it to the left, I can move it to the right, I can move it to the top right, but I think I'm fine with the top, and I have my legend there. Then last thing is just what, add a good title, which can be number of employees by gender and years of service. Okay, so that works. Then align to the right, make bold, come here, increase the font size, and I can maybe bring this down, bring this up. The rest is just preference. So this is a chart that maybe it's created in Excel, maybe you don't, but it shows certain information. So the same thing you can do to this, right? Format it the way you like, that shows all of the information that you're trying to do. That can be like your take-home assignment that you can try out later on. So let's look at the next one. So basically just been looking at categorical data, visualizing categorical data when you have one category, multiple categories. We've looked at the bar chart, we've looked at column chart, we've looked at stacked column chart, stacked bar chart. We want to now look at a different kind of data, which is one that is very common in economics, and that is visualizing time series related data that is across a time, maybe yearly, monthly, by the hour, by the minute, right? And the most effective way of showing time series data is what? Can anyone tell me? The most effective way of visualizing time series data. Okay, most effective way is to use a line chart. Okay, and you've probably seen a line chart almost anywhere you're talking about something over time, GDP over time, population over time, GNI per capita over time, anything that has to do with over time or it on a timely basis, and you are trying to show a trend. How has this thing changed over time? We mostly use a line chart. So that is the specific use of a line chart. So I can select my data now, Ctrl Shift down arrow, Ctrl Shift right arrow, and I go over to insert, and I insert a line chart, and look at what happens. Excel did what? It plotted my line chart, but at the same time it plotted my years, because it did not know that that was the category I'm trying to use. This happens a lot when you're trying to create charts, when you just select the chart type and try to create it. Sometimes Excel will get it, sometimes it won't. So what you can just do is to go and select the individual element. So when you click on the chart and you go to chart design, you'll see select data. When you click on select data, you have this box. In this box here now, you can see different elements. So right now, my year is added as a what? A series. And then for my category, horizontal category axis, I'm seeing just what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But that's not what I want, right? I want my year to be on the axis. So I can click edit here. Then it's telling me, okay, where is the range that I want to select? So I'll come here, select it, Control Shift down, okay, and I click on OK. So that is added to my years here. And then I come to this place here, and now I don't want the year to be part of my series. The only series I have in this case is what? GDP per capita. So I select year and press what? Remove. I click OK, and I have just one series across time. Awesome. There. Okay. So next thing now we can just do is, how can we make this chart much more visually appealing? Now looking at the chart, what are the things that don't seem right? The first thing is this label here. Alright, it has been tilted vertically, and it will make sense if it was what? Horizontally. Now how can we correct that? Because the reason why this is happening is Excel has seen that, okay, yes, this is numerical data, but there are too many for it to show it this thing properly. If we try to increase this, you see that it just keeps adding more data points. If I press Ctrl Z now, look at, we have 1960, 1963, 1966. It's skipping the years, but the more you try to expand this, it tries to add more years, So if I really wanted this to be straight now, I may have to expand till I have everything, and that might be too long. So I'll undo. Okay. So what we can do is to maybe say, okay, I don't need every single point to show in my data set. I just need maybe every 5 years to show, right? I just need every 5 years to show. So the way I can do that is I can add a special category, right? I can add a special category. So let me add a new column here now and call it year line chart, for example. It's not a good name, but let's just call it year line chart. And then after every 5 years is when we want to see that name. Now how can we achieve that? Because we have from 1960 to where? To 2020. So we cannot start going in one by one and say, okay, here I want 1960, then I'll look for, okay, I want 1965, and say I want 1970. You get the logic now. What I need to do is to find a way I can maybe use formulas, right, to create that year. So looking at this, what is a common way we can use to identify a year that is every 5 years? Is that if I divide this year by 5, I get a full number. But if I divide this one by 5, I get what? Decimals. Okay, so if I divide it by 5, I get full number. If I divide this by 5, I get a decimal. So we'll just use small maths that we did in secondary school. If you remember, if you did it right, something like modulo or remainder theory, right, where you say, okay, take the modulo of this, using this value, using this divider, and then you just use the remainder to determine how the value is and all of that. So what we can do is that we can use that same logic here. Now there's a function in Excel called mod, M-O-D. Okay, so what the mod function does is what? It returns the remainder after a number is divided by a divisor. Get? Okay. Sorry, can you still hear me? Okay, yeah, I'm back. Okay, so we have a function called mod. Now what the mod function does is that what it returns the remainder after a number is divided by a divisor. So if I say, okay, take the mod of this number, and my divisor is 5, right? This one perfectly divides by 5 and does not give me a remainder, but this one gives me a remainder. And then when I get to the next one that is divisible by 5, I don't get a remainder. So I can now use this to determine which of these years I want to show. So I can say, okay, if this mod value is equal to 0, let me do it here. I say if this mod value is equal to 0, give me the year. If it is not, don't give me anything, give me blank, and enter. And then when I copy this down, see what happens. Only after every 5 years do I actually get that year, right? I only get it after 5 years. And then with that, I can now plot my series. So I can change my my horizontal axis from the actual year to this new year line chart I created. So when you select on the chart now, it shows me that, okay, I'm plotting this one against this. I can just come here and move this. Okay, now it doesn't work, that's fine. I select the chart, go over to chart design, and go to select data. And then I want to edit my category axis. I go to edit, I'll delete what is here, and then I want to select this one instead. Ctrl Shift down to backspace, and I click on OK. Now see what happens here. I have all of those categories showing correctly without it being jam-packed. But it's not as if it's skipping from 1960 value to 1965. It is showing all of the values, but because I've chosen an axis, it's only showing me this particular axis. So this is a trick that you can use when you're visualizing time series data. I use it a lot because there will be times where you want to show a lot of series. Maybe you want to show data since like 1920 to 2035, where you have like 100, 50, 30 series, but you can't plot all of those series at once on a line, right? This is one option to try and say, okay, I just want to show every 5, every 4 points, every 3 points, without having to shrink down the time series that you want to show. Another option when it comes to visualizing time series data in Excel is to change the axis here to a time. To a date format. To change it to a date format. Let me see the chart. Okay, the chart. So it's to change the series to a date format. So if we look at this one now, let me insert a new row here now. Let me call it year as date. Right? If I just say, okay, let me just create a date series that will just be the 1st of January of each year, for example. Right? Look at the way Excel visualizes the data when it has date. So I would just say how to create a date using a function. There's a function in Excel called date. I'm not sure if you covered this in it. Okay, we covered it in the first physical class, but not everyone was there. So there's a function called date. We'll say equals to date, and then it returns the number that represents date in Microsoft Excel datetime code. So I'll say date. My year is going to be this, comma. My month is I'm just going to put the 1st of the year, as is January 1st, and then I get a date, and I can copy that down. Now I want to change how this dates look. I only want it to only show me the date. I'll come over to my number formatting. I'll go to more number formats. So these are some extra tips and tricks, and I'll come over to custom. Now look at the code I have here. It says what? DDMMYY. I only need what? The year, so I can delete it and just press okay, YYYY, and it shows me that okay, sample is what? 4 years. So when you want to work with parts of Excel dates, you can change how they look. The underlying date value is still going to be the 1st of January whatever year, but the only thing you're going to see in the cell, that's the way it's going to be formatted, is to only show the year. So if I click on OK now, see I just have here, and I have year. This one is a date, this one is just what? Number. See the difference with the visualization now. If I select this now, say go to chart design, select data. Okay, before I do that, maybe I should just create a copy. Ctrl D to duplicate. Now shift this one here so that we can compare the difference. No, Ctrl Z, select edge and move. Okay, so I'll go over to chart design, go to select data, edit, and this time around I want to use this one. Ctrl Shift down. Okay. Now I still have what we had the first time, but there's a difference between this one now. I think I'm correct. I can't remember, but I hope I'm correct. So let's select the axis and press Control 1, and then from these options here, say I have different type of axis type. Automatically detect based on selection, text axis or date axis, and I can say okay, date axis, and then the minimum value it has detected it, the maximum value it has detected it, and I can now change the units from, instead of every 3 years, I can change it to every what? 5 years. And look at that. I've not changed the data to be every 5 years. I've only changed the axis to show what? Every 5 years. So what we did with mod, we tried to select our own. If only we just converted data to what? The date, we can use that date feature in the horizontal axis to determine what is shown right in that what is shown on the horizontal axis. So this is a very useful trick, because almost everybody knows how to create a line chart in Excel. Select data, put it there, but it's only when it comes to formatting it and making it look presentable is where the issue starts to come in. So since we've just fixed that major issue, we can now just do some formatting to make it look better, right? Make it look better. So with the chart selected now, I would say okay, we have our title. Is our title fine? GDP per capita, current US dollars. It's not bad. I think I can leave it as that. Maybe I just want to make it bigger, say size 16, make it bold, and align it to the left. I always like to do that. Or maybe I want to raise it up as well. Okay, so I have my chart title selected. I'm formatted rather. Let's see the y-axis now, or the vertical axis. I can look at it that the extra decimals that I have is not really helping, right? It's not really helping. It's not bad if I just show 3,500 compared to 3,500.00. So I can select it and press Ctrl 1, and that will open my format pane. So if I come over to this last option here and I scroll down, now because I use it a lot, I know where some of these options are. So I can come down and say okay, I want to change the number, and instead of 2 decimal places I just want 0, and then it just formats it the way I want, and that's fine. Next thing I'll look at is my grid lines, right? Am I okay with the grid lines? It's not bad. I think it's fine. Maybe I want to make it dotted, but that's not really important. Then I'll look at my chart series itself. GDP per capita, orange, maybe not. let's see if we can make it better. I like to use a color that is not too loud and it's just calm. So in this case, you can't go wrong with gray. Honestly, you can just change it down to gray, right? And you're still showing the right thing. Change it down to gray. Maybe I want it to be thick, maybe I want it to be lighter. I can go to line, and then in the width I can reduce it to maybe 1.75 or 1.5, so that it just looks like a line that shows a trend. And then maybe I now want to add dots like markers. Okay, I can come over to line, then select marker, and then go to marker options and click built-in, and then it adds a dot, like a marker, basically marking each of the points that are visualized. It may not be useful because in this case now it will just be too much, so I leave it as none, but that's just an option. Maybe you want to show all of the points using a particular dot on it, you can do that. And then the last thing we're going to look at is the legend that we have here. Now, a legend is mostly useful when you have more than one series, right? So you can easily distinguish between, okay, this color represents this series and that color represents this other series. But in this case, we're only showing GDP per capita, so we can just say, okay, we don't need the series. I'll select the series and press delete, and that takes it out, right? Then maybe I want to add axis titles so that I can show that this one is year and this one is value in US dollars, for example. You can do that as well. But I think with the little formatting that we have done, this is is nice compared to, I think we have a comparison here compared to this. So let me zoom out and see. So looking at this two, will you say this is better than this one, at least visually? Will you say that? I believe it is so. Is there anyone else that agrees or disagrees with that? Or let's even revert it to the actual one that it was. So let's convert this axis back to what we were showing initially when we just selected data and showed just select data and visualize, and left it as what Excel gave us. And let's see the difference. So looking at these two, which one would you say is better? To me, I think this one is better than this, right? I think this one is better than this. So that's just visualizing time series. Okay, this would probably be common for many of us that are going to be writing reports or assignments or projects, and then you want to add a chart. You can always create something that does not look like you just spit it out from Excel. It shows that, oh, this person was intentional about certain things to make this chart actually look better. So that is line charts to visualize trends and time series data. So we've looked at categorical, bar, the column, the pie, stack bar, clustered bar, stack column, clustered column, and then a line chart. Next one we are going to look at is a scatter plot. Now, a scatter plot is something that we are used to because we are economists, right? Something that we are used to because we are economists, where you are just showing the relationship between some x and some y values. So this is a scatter plot. And what is a scatter plot, or why do you use a scatter plot? Is when you want to basically show the relationship between two values, or you want to show a correlation, right? You want to show a correlation. Now, for those of us that are in year 2, year 3, you're already used to some of this correlation. Even year 1 too, right? You already have an idea of when we're talking about relationship between variables or correlation, right? Even your basic demand and supply is a correlation, right? It's a correlation. It's like is a representation of the relationship between two variables. So we're also looking at a correlation. So let's see now how we can create a scatter plot. So I have a sample data here. This is for Nigeria, and it's from 2000 to 2020. That shows our oil revenue in dollars and our GNI per capita from 2000 to 2020. So we want to see, okay, the relationship or correlation between the oil revenue and GNI per capita. Now there are two ways we can visualize this relationship, but we are going to use a scatter plot, right, or an XY diagram or a scatter diagram, anyhow you want to call it. So now let's just select the data. So in this case, we don't need to show the year. We just want to create a scatter diagram. So we just select only the two series that we need. We'll go over to insert, and then here you see scatter diagram. So we have a scatter chart. Let me use the other one so that you see the names. Open all of the charts, go to all charts, and come down to where is it, XY scatter. So I have this is one. I have a connected scatter plot. I have a scatter plot with smooth lines, blah blah blah, bubble charts, all of that. So I just need a scatter plot. Now looking at the preview, this is not looking like what I want, but this is. So I'll select that and I will click OK. So I have a scatter chart created for me, right? I have a scatter chart created for me. I can just click on it and maybe expand it a little bit. Now what the scatter chart is basically showing is what the relationship between this. So just because we know the values are distinctively different, we can tell that on the y-axis we have GNI per capita, and on the x-axis we have the oil revenue. So this is how easy it is to create a scatter plot. But if we were going to present this as part of a document or as part of a report, I think we can make this look, much more visually appealing, right? We can make this look more visually appealing. So let's start looking at the different elements. Starting from the top, we have the chart title, right? So the chart title, maybe in this case we want to say, okay, relationship, or let's use correlation. No, let's use relationship between oil revenue and GNI per capita, right? So make it bold and increase the font to maybe 16. Okay, I don't like that. Let's leave it as this, or increase to 16. Press Ctrl 1 and see, maybe we can undo the wrapping. So we can't. That's fine. I can reduce the text. I prefer it to be one line. Okay. So I have my chart title. Next thing is to say, oh, these crumbled values here, they are not very good, and that's because the values here are in millions, right? They are in millions. So I might decide that, okay, if I select this now and go to my format pane here, maybe instead of making it the values every 2 million, I can make it every 4 million. So I'll just change this first value here to 4. So the major is going to be every 4 million, so that is close. There's no, understand, what's it called now? It's not clustered together. So okay, I have the two axes, at least they are formatted a little bit nicely, but I would like to know which one is GNI per capita and which one is oil revenue. So I would select this, and then using this my special plus icon here, I can add axis titles. So I select it and it adds an axis title. So then I can now go into each of these axis titles and add a title to it. So for this one, I can select it, delete, and say okay, this one is going to be oil revenue. Then I'll go to the second one, and this one is going to be GNI per capita. Okay, so this is going to be GNI per capita, and this is going to be oil revenue. Maybe I want to make this a little bit bigger so that it is obvious when you are reading it. So I can increase this to 11. Come here, increase this to 11. I can also increase my grid and my axis labels. This one to 10, and this one to 10. Okay, so this now is much more better than what we started with. We can easily tell that okay, this is a relationship between GNI per capita and oil. We have GNI per capita on the x-axis, on the y-axis. We have oil revenue on the x-axis. Now looking at this one again, I'm showing you how I would create it. So I'm seeing that I have decimal places here. I don't think I need that, so I select it. I go to the axis options, go down to number, change it to 0. I think that's much more better. And then, is there really a point for this one starting at 1000? Since we don't have GNI per capita values until around between 2000 and 3000, I can decide to start my axis instead of at 0 to start it at 2000, for example. Okay, but the only time you should not do this is when you are using a bar chart. So if you are going to be visualizing data with a bar chart or a column chart, always start your axis at 0, no matter what, because it has implications on how the data will be perceived. Maybe I will show an example when we get to the end. Okay, so I'll select this one now, go over to axis options here, and then under axis options I can say okay, start at 2000. Did I press 200? Okay, sorry, 2000. So it starts at 2000, and I still want it to increase by 1000. So I'll go to the units and I'll change the measure from 100 to 1000, and I can change the minor to 500. Okay, so this is looking much more better. Maybe I still want to add extra grid lines. You can do that. So while the chart is selected, click on the plus icon, I go over to grid lines, click on this drop down here, and then I can add those extra grid lines. Okay, maybe you want it to look like a graph or something like that, you can add the grid lines to it. Well, I think this is better. I might even take off both of the grid lines since I'm just interested in showing a relationship between them. Let's leave the grid lines there. Okay, let's leave the grid lines there, and then we are pretty much done with creating the chart. Right, we've formatted the axis, we've made it look much more better, and we can easily understand that we are showing the relationship between oil revenue and GNI per capita. But there are some extra features that you can add to it. Now when you create charts when you create a scatter plot, you have the option to do a little statistics with it, right? And like adding a trend line or creating an equation that shows the relationship between the two of them. I'm just going to show you the trend line. If I select this alt chart element, I see a trend line here. So when I select the trend line, it just basically tries to fit a line that shows the relationship that we are seeing between these two values. Okay, so I say, okay, there seems to be like a positive relationship. As oil revenue increases, GNI per capita also tends to increase. So I can just leave my chart like this and I'm good to go for my diagram. If you are like me and you still don't like using Excel default colors, you know the drill already by now. Select this, go to my filter pane here, change it to marker, blue to gray. I always start with gray a lot of times. So gray, and then there are some blue borders around it. Maybe I don't want that. Go back, select it, I go to marker and change the border to no line so that there are no borders around it. And so I have my trend line. You can change the color. I have my charts. You can change the color of the trend line from blue to maybe green or yellow, whatever you want. Choice is yours. Right, you have all of the options here. Maybe you want to dark blue, whatever. So there we have our chart that shows the relationship between our revenue and GNI per capita. This is a scatter plot that we have created in Excel, and we have formatted using Excel features. I think the last chart is pivot chart. Okay, so we have seen a range of charts in the last 2 hours, from visualizing categorical data using bar charts, column charts, and their clustered version, their stacked version, to using pie charts. And we've understood when to use a bar versus a column chart, or when to use a pie chart versus a bar chart. So just as a means of interaction, can anyone just tell me when, like what I said about when to use a pie chart versus when to use a bar chart? Just in the next 5 to 10 seconds. I don't want us to drag for too long. So when do you use a pie chart compared to a bar chart? You can unmute and speak.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
So, you can make use of a pie chart when you're just trying to differentiate maybe like two outcomes or like maximum four to make it understandable and presentable. Then why bar charts when you have more figures to display?
Yeah, okay, that's correct, right? That's correct. So while the pie charts can help you show, how different parts fit into a whole, right? Okay, how this part contributes and this part contributes and that part contributes. There's a limit to the number of categories that you can show before the chart gets clumsy and noisy. But with a bar chart, you can show how different parts contribute, but you can also show multiple categories. So that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So we've looked at line charts, we've looked at scatter diagrams, and you will see that so far as we're creating these charts in Excel, we just had the data sitting somewhere. Okay, we just had data sitting somewhere, and then we just select create. But there are times where maybe, number one, you have, like, for example, a survey, right? You issue a questionnaire, you gather everything data, you want to analyze it, right? Those kind of data sets are not yet summarized. So sometimes you may need to summarize it and then create a chart from the summary. Or alternatively, right, you may want to create something that you can filter and say, okay, show me the chart for only this set of values, right? So that is where a pivot chart comes in. I believe in week 3, week 2 and week 3, we looked at pivot chart and pivot tables. That basically, okay, you select data set and then pivot tables summarize data sets. Now you can take the pivot tables also to the next level by creating a chart from those pivot tables, and that's what we call pivot charts. Okay, so I'm just going to use this data as an example. So we've seen part of the summary from it in the first visual that we created, and this is just, let's say, it's a survey about 6,400 records here. That just basically, okay, each employee provides information about their age, their marital status, whether or not they are retired, and the current years with their employer and their job satisfaction. And so we want to create a chart off of this by summarizing the data. Okay, that's what we want to do. So let's create a pivot chart. How do we do that? We select all of the data by pressing Ctrl A. Okay, and then we go over to insert pivot table from table or range, and then we'll put this on the existing worksheet and just select this cell. Okay, so as a first example, let's try to where is the first one that we did? Yes, let me see. The first one that we did, I think that's multiple categories. Okay, yeah, so let's try to recreate this with the pivot table. So we are showing gender, years of service by number of employees. Okay, so we have this now. So we'll select this and then drag our gender down to rows. We'll drag years with current employer down to columns, and then we can just use maybe this marital status and then give us the count. So now we have the gender, we have the years of service, and then we have the number of employees for that. So let's add some number formatting. Right click, number format, go to number, use commas, no decimal places. Okay, so we see, okay, we have female 3,179 employees, male 3,221, and the grand total of 64. Can change this to number of employees. Okay, now how do you create a chart out of this? As the first option, you can select it and go to insert and create a chart, just as we have been doing before. But when you have a pivot table, you can create a chart that is connected to that pivot table. So with the pivot table selected, I'll go over to pivot table analyze, and then under tools here, you select pivot chart, and then we have that same chart option. So let's start by recreating what we had before. I'll go to bar, and I'll go to clustered bar and click OK. And then we have something similar to what we had before. Let me just expand this. Then, because it's a pivot chart, it comes with some other extra elements. But maybe you don't need these extra elements. All you just need to do is what? Right click and select where is it? Okay, no, not that. So click on any of these extra elements, right click on it and select hide all field buttons. So these are called field buttons. You can select hide all field buttons, and then it takes all of that away. So we basically have the same chart that we had before, but this time around it is connected to a pivot table. Now, how is this different? Is this now, look at anything I do to this pivot table affects the pivot chart. Do you see? I collapsed the category of female, it collapsed. I collapsed this and collapsed both of them, it also collapsed. So anything I do with the pivot chart affects the pivot table. If the table that created this pivot table if the table that created this pivot table should change and I refresh my pivot table, right, the new set of values I have here is what's going to be fed into this pivot chart. Okay, so all of the chart types that we have created before, most of them are available as well with pivot charts. So the same formatting options that we had with the pivot chart, with the normal charts, normal Excel charts, is what we have here as well. So we can format, select legend, delete the grid lines, come here, add data labels, all of those good stuff that we did. You can do it here as well. You have the exact same set of options with the pivot chart, except that a pivot chart is built off of a pivot table. Anything that happens to the pivot table gets fed directly into the pivot chart. Okay, so just as when the chart is selected, you have two new tabs, design and format, where you can use to change all of the features of the pivot chart. So that's majorly the difference, right, with the pivot chart. And with this pivot chart selected, even just with an ordinary pivot table, we can filter, right? We can filter. So I can come over to, let's say, pivot table analyze, and I say I want to insert a slicer, and then I say, okay, I want to insert a slicer based on the retired field, and I say okay. Now we didn't I covered this one in week 3, I think. Yeah, so with the slicer now, I can say, okay, I want to show only the data for where they are retired, where retired says yes, and look at that. Because my slicer, all of this is connected to one table, when I click on my slicer, this gets filtered down to only those that say yes. And when my pivot table gets filtered down, my pivot chart also gets filtered. So now I'm showing data for those that are retired, and then across the gender and their years of service. So that's the beauty of pivot charts, is what you can filter them. They're connected to a table, and when the table gets updated or the table changes, what you have in the pivot chart also changes. Yeah. Okay. I think my network is bad again. Oh, we're almost done. Just hold on while I try to reconnect. Okay, I think I'm back now. Okay, yeah, I'm back. So let me share my screen back again. Yeah. Okay, so I was saying that the difference between a pivot table and a pivot chart is that for a pivot chart, it's all connected to one source that you can filter anyhow you want. If I select retired, this just changes. I'm showing data for only those that are retired, and I'm showing the number of employees by gender and years of service. I can decide to add more filters to it, and it just works, right? It just works. So the chart options that are available for a pivot chart, we have almost all of the charts that we've covered, except for a few, right? Except for a few, but most of them are available. So that's it about visualization for today. The goal was just to expose you to the different chart types you have in Excel, how you can create them, and some considerations around what to consider as you create the charts. Okay, so do we have any questions? Right. I still have some things I'm just trying to show at the end, but do we have any questions? Let me check the chat. Okay, no message at the chat. Okay, so as a form of motivation, I have put together some examples of charts that can be created in Excel, because when you hear about the concept of visualizing data, most people just always think, oh, I have to use a very sophisticated software. But I want to let you know that even with Excel, right, you can create some very, very nice and insightful visualizations. So if you go over to this example sheet now, these are some visualizations that have been created entirely in Excel, right? Maybe leveraging some aspects of some advanced aspect and all of that. Now, some of these I created myself, some of these I took them online, right? So this one I created by myself using just Excel. And if I have shown you this last time, maybe you would figure that it is Excel, maybe you won't, right? But the kind of things you can create in Excel are they're just awesome if you know how. So this is another example. This is also another example. So these first three that I've shown now are something I created just using Excel, right? Here we're looking at inflation rates monthly. Here we're looking at Zenith Bank's operating expenses between 2019 and 2020, and here we are looking at crude oil terminal operations in Nigeria, right? So there are a lot of things you can do. Let me show you a few more. So this is like a stack bar chart that I just showed you now, right? Stack bar chart. So this is created in Excel. We have pie charts. So we have pie charts, and then we have donut charts. So the difference between the pie charts and the donut charts is just that the donut chart has a hole at the center here, but the pie doesn't. But the same set of principles that apply to the pie chart also apply to the donut chart, right? So this is also another one. All of this created entirely in Excel. This created entirely in Excel. And the one that always surprises me anytime I see this one, this was done entirely in Excel, right, by John Schwabish. He's a database expert and also an economist. So this was done in Excel. This as well was done in Excel. So the kind of visualizations you can create in Excel are just, I don't know, man, they are just crazy if you know how. So anytime you think of data visualization, I don't want you to always think of, oh, I need to use an advanced software. Excel is a good place to start. All you just need to know is what some basic data visualization concepts and how you can create those charts in Excel. In a mail I sent, I believe 3 days ago or so, I attached a link to a Google Drive where I had collated a lot of resources that you can use to learn about data visualization and principles of visualizing data if you are interested, right? So they cover the theories and the how to's are there. In that folder we also have resources on Excel, different PDFs and textbooks that have been written by experts, right, over time. So you can also check those out, right? You can also check those out. Okay, yeah, you can also check those out. I just want to help you guys even after the training to still explore, right? To still explore. Let's say the goal of the training, right, was not to make people experts, was to give people a start, a solid start from where if they now try to expand further it would be easy, right? It would be easy. So we've come to the end of the training. Today marks the last day, and this was the last concept I wanted us to cover, which is data visualization. So I would leave the chat open now. If you have any questions, you can ask in the next 5 minutes. Right? If you have any questions, you can ask in the next 5 minutes. Going forward, I would just send in mails that would give you access to resources, and I also recommend a couple of courses that you can do if you want to further your knowledge in the use of Excel, data analytics, data visualization, and all of that. Okay, so any question, guys? All right, since there are no questions, I think we can call it a day now or an afternoon. All right, so see you guys on the group. You can always reach out to me either on the group or on WhatsApp. I shared my WhatsApp number I think last week, right? So any other information that we need, I will be sure to pass it across to you guys, either via email or on the Telegram group. So thank you. Yes, the class is recorded. Yes, the class is recorded, and the recording will be made available latest by Sunday evening. So thank you for joining the training from day one. We've been together for the past 4 weeks, learning little bits of Excel step by step. And I hope that over these 4 weeks that we had, you have learned more about Excel and have at least advanced beyond where you were before in your knowledge of the use of Excel. Thank you once again, and bye bye. Yeah, the pleasure is all mine.